prospective approach. You look for trends, you look for uncertainties, you look for big questions that are going to set the future. We came up in the end with two major questions, which are, will there be really much more data available that can be monetized? And this comes from the consumer perception of data and the attitude, the control he wants to have. So will it be open and shared and so on? It will come also from regulation. Okay, regulation from the government and so on what can I do with the data or not. So that's the first axe. The first axis you can see here, availability and openness of data. And obviously there's the usual arbitrage in which I'm going to give you more data if I get more innovative services. The second axis is the nature of the ecosystem. Okay, so open or closed, and today we consider that in the OTT, the main players have closed ecosystems, and they're fighting against each other to have the bigger one. Okay, so those were the two main questions, and that openness will come from the existence of standards, technology standards, and so on, and the competition rules, which depend country by country and region by region. The most likely scenario is obviously the platform wars. So it's kind of an extension of today's world in which the GAFA are fighting each other. It would be a little bit different than today because there would be two new type of players involved. We've mentioned the Chinese players, Tencent, Sina, and so on, and we believe they have the capacity to extend globally, and they're doing it already, targeting not necessarily the US and the advanced countries, but all of the other emerging countries. And that's obviously key, as they have already a strong domestic market. China is very different from all of the other BRICS regarding the internet services. So we would have the Chinese in addition, and we would have also the big retailers, Tesco, Walmart, Carrefour, and so on. They will have to react. They're starting to do it. They're putting a lot of money in IT, in diversification, in services themselves. They're having a hard time right now, but we believe they're going to put more money, and Walmart has always been positioned there to give that kind of solution. So why do we believe that this scenario is the most likely? There are signals, okay? There are plenty of signals today in the market that are showing that we're going this way. First of all, there is the shopping spree, the acquisition frenziness that is back again, at least on the OTT players, with many big acquisition, WhatsApp being probably the biggest example from Facebook, from a company that already has a key OTT messaging services with Facebook's Messenger anyway. But there's been plenty of others with Google and Nest and so on. So that's the first thing. I mean, we see that they're trying to reinforce the platform by aggregating directly themselves some services. They're going beyond just traditional consumer digital services with the verticals. And we've seen the acquisition in IoT, in robotics. Google has acquired 10 companies in robotics. We've seen Google Wallet. Everybody's expecting Google Car, and so on. Then final thing, which is showing that they're trying to build a platform. The platform, you need to attract people, okay, on the platform. And so you need to secure as much as you can and lower the cost. And for that, you internalize a lot of the infrastructure yourself. And all of those guys are developing their own solution. Data centers, Hadoop in big data, and so on, Thread in IoT. There are plenty of examples in which they're building the blocks themselves. So that's the first scenario. As you can see, that would be 12% of growth per year from 2013 to 2025. That's huge. Obviously, as you can see, even in the lowest scenario, it's 9% per year for 12 years for only OTT services, okay, and equivalent. And I'll get some detail later on what is covered in the scope. Second scenario, which is probably one of the most unlikely, even though it's a lot talked about, which is open innovation. How to get there? Standards. HTML5 is probably one of the biggest example, even though everybody's trying to put some modification in there to make sure it's not totally standard. Data portability being discussed at the European Commission level, for instance, to make sure that you can transfer the data, and VRM tools, so vendor relationship management tools, they're being promoted here by the government in the UK with Me Data, for instance. Open data, open APIs, so that does exist, okay, today. Open data does not exist that much, but it's very limited compared to what could be expected. Open APIs, there are plenty of those APIs already available with Twitter and players equivalent like that and Google Maps. I mean, we're talking about billion calls of APIs a day, okay? But this is limited to a very specific set of services. To get there, obviously, what would happen is that we would have really a lot of the users willing to share more data. And for that, we need a little bit more new innovative services. And that can come from quantified self. In fact, we've seen in surveys that people like to measure themselves, their weight and so on. I'm sorry. Their weight and so on. It's just that it's not necessarily used to share the data, to compile the data, to track this data. So they just used to remember the last data. But we can see that people are okay with measurement. The issue is, how do I share that data? With the appropriate framework on privacy and security, and probably in that scenario being paid, in fact, for this data, and a lot of the VRM tools that are trying to develop around this concept, okay? I'll give you my data, but I get some of the money that is generated through that. And that already exists at a small level with many of the cashback systems, for instance. And then here, obviously, to benefit from that, we would have a lot of development of targeted ads solution. And that's already the case with RTB, real-time bidding solution, that are being developed in the market, which is the fastest growing subsegment of the advertising market. But today, we don't believe so much in that scenario, because there are plenty of barriers to make sure we don't go into that direction. In fact, the best alternative today of platform wars would be the low-cost islands. In that scenario, in fact, the ecosystem would still be open, because there would have been promotion of standards and there would be competition rules to try to break the platforms. And we're seeing start of the debate around breaking Google at the European level and Parliament. Okay, this has no potential effect in the short term, okay? But still, this is the discussion on limiting the platform, limiting the bundles that could exist. And at the same time, you would have still the big thing that has been developed in the internet, which is providing the same or equivalent services at a lower cost. And that there is no discussion when you have that. And with Netflix is just $10 compared to $100 cable bill, okay? So there's no discussion. It's the way you can use the services for cheaper. And all of those services, in fact, and there are plenty of services that do not use that much of data. I mean, Uber, Netflix, Twitter, and so on. Today, what is being used in terms of monetization is still mass or direct transactions. The monetization of the data is quite limited. So here we would have a bunch of development of services regarding low cost, with typically the sharing economy services we're seeing today with Uber and BRB. I mean, the main thing people are looking at is still the same product, cheaper. 3D printing, again, access to kind of the same of product and services, cheaper. Also, we see a little bit of development of privacy-friendly services, privacy by design. Today, this is far from being adopted by the mass market. Services like DuckDuckGo, which are alternative search engines. There is Hello on social networks and so on. Okay, we've seen spikes and a little bit of growth of adoption when there's been the Prism scandal and NSA scandal and so on. But today, they're just like thousands of Google. But still, I mean, in that scenario, those kind of players, either by providing more privacy-friendly services or very centric services on something in which you get a lot of advantage business-wise, and so you adopt it. The competition would prevent the development of platforms in that scenario, so we'd still have a lot of islands, that's why we call it like that, of services very focused on one thing and doing it very efficiently and making money with it. Then finally, the last scenario, paper trust, would be in a world in which, okay, people are really affected now by the security breaches we're seeing like every day, and which has had limited impacts today on the trust level of the users. In fact, in which we generally call that the privacy paradox, the security paradox. People are aware that there might be some issues, there are some risks, but the benefits perceived are bigger. And there are not so much alternatives, so they still use the service. There are many services, in fact, in which they don't trust, but they use it. And in that scenario, obviously, people would turn to the brands that they're more likely to trust. And that's where we believe that we would have like a little bit of a return to the physical world with players that are more developed in the device area, in the brick and mortar and so on, in which we would see banks, we would see people that have like e-commerce facilities, but with physical presence. And in fact, we're seeing, I mean, even the big players from the internet looking to put shops here and there would have a focus on security. And that's been, for instance, the case of Apple with Apple Pay. I mean, they didn't talk so much about NFC and so on. They just talk about security, to try to develop their product. Again, here we see also some signs that could go that way. I mean, a lot of encryption is being developed now around WhatsApp, Hangouts, and so on. And so there is investment in the in the security. And then we would expect traditional industry also to fight back and try to develop some services and obviously put pressure on the competitive at the competition authority level. And they've done a good job today to try to limit the influence of Uber in some countries. Okay, Uber is not so accessible in so many countries, and we're not talking about Yemen or China as usual. Okay, we're talking about Germany, San Francisco, and so on. So we're in the different world here in which people are trying to prevent some of the adoption, and they've made a good job of going this way. So in a nutshell, the four scenarios, still the most likely the platform wars, with variations around there. And just to give you an overview of what would be the market in 2025, we're talking about today of a market of 230 billion euro, and this is including advertising, cloud services, e-commerce commissions, and paid digital content, and even smart products and services coming from the IoT. So that's the result for the platform war scenario. I mean, we've done the exercise to forecast all of the markets, as you can see, and this is also a key message that you still have to have in mind. First, advertising would be 45% of the market. So the majority of the market is still paid transactions, paid content, and if you get rid of cloud because it's more business oriented, would be neck and neck, okay? Second, in that scenario, we're reaching close to 900 billion euro by 2025, which means 65% of telecom industry revenues. So it's not anymore something minor or that is on the side. It's really a huge market for the future. Thank you, and I'll let the floor to the roundtable to Steve. Thank you.